Welcome to the Jess Larson Show on innovation and leadership. I'm joined on this episode by my great friend, Lindsay Hadley. Linz, why don't you take it over and introduce our guest?
Yeah, thanks again for having me, Jess. It's so fun to co-host these with you. And I am thrilled to introduce our guest, Drew Fitzgerald. And Drew and I were introduced by a mutual friend of ours, Tim Sexton, and he said something effective, "You're going to love each other," which was absolutely prophetic because Drew and I are now working together in all different capacities. And Drew has an amazing career and a background that's spanned kind of a big breadth of verticals. I mean, he started out in the entertainment and hip hop world, branding some of the most famous rappers and hip hop artists in history. And he's going to talk a little bit about that as a creative genius. And then he ended up having a deep, background in the private sector and understanding technology with his work as kind of much more of a practical um, innovator in the space. He's going to talk a little bit about that in his work with MIT. And then now he's also built some amazing brands. If any of you have seen the Just Water, he usually has a Just Water bottle like right on tap to show the screen. Can you just do product placement? Yeah, there we go. That he founded with exactly that he founded with Will Smith and his family Jaden. And we're really excited for him to talk about that as the social enterprise and how you came into that world. And then last but not least, about what he's doing now, which is so exciting with the capacity of how we connected, which is his new purview of leveraging philanthropic dollars for the private sector and accomplishing really scalable solutions. This new platform is called Ecosystems. I'm super excited for you to talk about that. Drew, thanks for coming here today and joining us. This is so fun.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited. I love this podcast, and I'm glad to see both of you. So, where
So
can we
great.
start?
So Drew, yeah, first I just want to start off with why don't you start us back in the beginning of your career? Like, how did you find yourself in the hip hop world? And tell us a little bit about your journey, of being able and which artists you worked with, what was fun about it, how you ended up becoming this kind of well-known creative, I guess, like thought leader in the space of hip hop.
I couldn't, when I came out of Syracuse University in 1993, this was the year when people that went to art school were starting to learn with computers. And I had just spent my 4 years making mechanical things with my hands, and I wanted to go into advertising. Right. So I walked out at this time when there was this technological apex that was happening, or a threshold that was happening, where I left Syracuse with a lot of very analog work that you were supposed to get a job on. And I would go to these agencies that were a little further along, and they were like, "Dude, you have no computer work in your book. You got to get better at the computers." And I was just like, "Wow, this is rough." And so I went to a place in Soho. I was in New York. I went to a place in Soho that said we were in computers. And I was like, "All right, God, I just had 4 years of getting a MF or a BFA at Syracuse, and I was kind of set out into the world, handsomely prepared to fail." And I went to this place, and I just by through serendipity, the woman who ran the computer department like quit that day. And the guy who ran it was like, "Hey, where am I going to find some young, hungry kid who wants to be involved in computers and do it?" And I was like, "I will take this job. I'll take this job on the spot." I could not get a job up at the very glossy ivory tower ad agency. So I ended up taking an on the street level job at a highfalutin Kinko's on Hudson Street in Soho. Right. And what I didn't know at the time, I was like, I'll just take this job for a little while. What I learned was there was a lot of people in there that taught me what I didn't get at Syracuse. And this is not a slight on Syracuse. It's just a slight on the timing. Yeah, the era was here. And so what I didn't know, this little sort of, they call them service bureaus, but they're highfalutin Kinkos. And all the clients that were around them were all these really big time ad agencies. And one of them was Def Jam Records, which was up above. So all these art directors up at Def Jam that were doing like Wu-Tang and Method Man and Redman and Biggie and all this stuff would come down, and they would ask me to help them navigate the computer to print them out so they can present them to the artists, right? Whatever. And so I got friendly with all the art directors, and I got sort of better than them at the computers. Like they're up there doing all this stuff and with Russell Simmons and hip hop and all this stuff, but they weren't as good as me at the computers because I was in a place where there was a highly technological thing for imaging and scanning and printing all that stuff. So this guy comes down and he's like, "Hey, I'm Drew." This guy's named Kenny. He goes, "I'm going to take a job uptown at MCA Records." I'm like, "Okay, cool. What is that?" I didn't know MCA Records was like the epicenter of the record industry. It was owned by Universal Studios. I was like, he's like, "I can't take anyone with me from the department because I'm a non-compete. Do you want to come up and work at this new hip hop and R&B thing that they were want to do. And I was like, yeah, I had no understanding of hip hop, no understanding. I, I listened to jam bands in college. I didn't know it. I'm a white kid from upstate New York. And he's like, you got to come up to they're forming this dream team of hip hop and R&B. And it's run by one of the guys who was like the fifth member of Public Enemy, a guy named Hank Shockley, who's kind of a legend in the hip hop production space. I didn't know any of these people. And I walked in the first day, and it's a big conference room up on 57th Street, and I'm the only white guy. And I walk in, and a guy who's a kind of a famous rapper from the late 80s, Daddio, who and I became very good friends over the course of the years to come. He looked at me and goes, "Hey, who ordered food?" To this group. I go, "No, I'm going to be your art director. It's going to be amazing." Anyway, this was at a time when hip hop was really on the start to get on the rise. It was like Foxy Brown and Puffy and Biggie, and hip hop was really starting to take over the mainstream. And there just was not a lot of people, young art directors in that space. And so there was a tremendous amount of work to do. And as I started to kind of get my feet wet at MCA Universal, we were dealing with serious artists like B.B. King, Patti LaBelle, Mary J. Blige. My very first photo shoot was Al Green in Memphis. I've never been on a photo set, never been to a photo shoot. My boss had broken his arm, and he goes, "Dude, you got to go to Memphis and meet Al Green." I'm like, "What? Where is Memphis?" It was like, I'm like 24. Yeah. So anyway, I really kind of thought, one of the things I was always kind of taught to me by my dad and by some other people was, if you really want to be good at something, you need to understand the business better than your client. Right. And so I just fell in love with hip hop and R&B. And I just loved the culture, loved the community. And they asked me to come to LA for 3 months to work on Mary J. Blige. I was like, wow, what a great opportunity. And Mary and I had gone on and had a very long career. She's one of the longest partnerships I'd had with an artist, her, Lionel Richie, and Enrique Iglesias. And Mark Anthony, sort of. That's a longer story. And so they said, come out to LA and for 3 months. All right. So a couple people came out to LA, and then they fired everyone in New York. I was like, whoa, it was like my first lesson of like, wow, entertainment can be kind of a little bit hardcore. So they were like, look, kid, we'll fly you back to New York, but you won't have a job, or you can stay here and you can work across, in New York, I'm working on like the 7th floor of a technical building. But out here, I open up my curtains, I'm looking over the whole Universal lot. And there's like Spielberg's place and the Psycho set and Back to the Future stuff. So it's a totally different environment and lifestyle. I'm like, this is amazing. I can just go walk around the lot. If you've ever been on a movie lot, it's pretty classically dramatic. It's neat. And so anyway, so I spent 5 years, and I rose to the top of creative director of urban music and urban soundtracks, which was big business. How Stella Got Her Groove Back and all these types of movies that were there. And I just had a great job, and I had made a lot of great artwork in an environment that I never really saw myself. And I just kind of ran with it. And that was a great tenure at MC Universal. So throughout the course of that, some of the people that I had worked with, namely Will Smith and Jada, became, we've had a decades-long partnership of creating things across a variety of different sort of verticals and projects and things like that. So that's kind of how I fell into hip hop, and I'm very proud of the work I've done, and I have plenty of hip hop stories.
That's so cool.
I can't share.
I mean, it's really fun because, I think people don't realize how much of the entertainment industry is actually architected by the teams around them, the creative geniuses, the branding, their management, their lawyers. Like, it's a whole machinery, and it's their brand is a business, essentially, right? And so this kind of makes me think about, what it was like. I guess you guys were really like an emerging market, that urban music and that whole scene becoming really mainstream. I mean, you were at the pioneering stage of all that. And I think it feels to me like, Drew, I see a theme from knowing you now across your career. You're kind of a pioneer. You're a renegade. You're like, all right, let's push the envelope, new things. What is it that from your life that, and this is maybe a more of an existential question, but what do you think it is that makes you like that you want to span horizons, that you want to be on the edge of what's up next in culture, in the world, and making a difference?
I think what happens is when younger kids, younger boys and girls, develop what I call a confidence trajectory from this demonstrating something. And this is something that I exhibited um, a developed skill at being an artist really early, and I got kind of patted on the back for that, or recognized for that. And so what happens is that, and you get patted on the back, and you get sort of adulate. And I think there's an inequity in that. We can kind of go into that because some kids are not really celebrated when they're little kids. They just aren't really developing. They're not shining. And that's not fair that somebody like myself necessarily got the pat on the back and the recognition and the adulation. But I did. And as a result, I started really early having what I would call a confidence trajectory in terms of being brave around things. And, artistry can be something that's very hard to wander into. I mean, even John Mayer says that he constantly has to be brave, and he's just a fantastic songwriter. And you'd think at this point his bravery quotient would be like at 100, but he's like, no, I need to be brave all the time when I write songs. So anyway, so I got a confidence sort of confirmation or very early on. And so that allowed me to say, okay, I am able to be an artist. I am able to take risks, and I'm able to think about what an artist is. And what I've learned from my times of being an applied and formal artist really also applied to a lot of the engineering work that I came across at MIT. And that the similarity between engineers and artists is actually quite similar, despite they may work from different hemispheres of the brain, as a convenient definition. And I remember the first day or the first week I was at MIT, there was a guy who was talking to me about something called a waste heat conversion innovation that comes off of cars, right? And he was explaining to me, started getting deep into it. And I said to him, I go, whoa, hey man, you're getting you got me. And I jokingly said, I went to art school. And he kind of like stopped and he took umbrage. And he goes, no, he said, you're not thinking about this the right way. He said, artists and engineers are similar because they fail a lot and they have a blank canvas in front of them. And the way they look at problems, that's like what Edison said. I said he invented 999 ways not to invent the light bulb. And so that the ability for me to go into sustainability, go into impact, go into engineering, all came from having a supportive family and having an artist's confidence very early on to say, I can go out here, I can ski out front, I can get out over my skis, and I can fail. And you learned it. That's the arc or the value chain of being an artist and being exposed, being an innovator.
Oh, I love that answer. I mean, I love how you're tying it in art because I think in a way entrepreneurship is an art. And Jess, who has spent his lifetime as an entrepreneur and coaching entrepreneurs. Jess, what does this bring up for you? Also, by the way, Jess is an artist, so this is kind of probably a fun conversation for him.
You're making me very encouraged that I can be successful later in life, Drew, because I'm originally an art school dropout, illustration major, very, very analog.
Okay.
And
yeah, we have the same. Yeah, we have the same path.
So you touched on we touched on Just Water for a minute. Why don't you talk about what was so special about that brand and how that came about with the Smiths?
Sure. Well, I at a certain point when you're in Hollywood, you've kind of done everything. You have made, specifically more on the communications and brand standpoint. I've done everything in music, and I've done lots of stuff in TV and lots of stuff in movies. And I just kind of, at a certain point in your life, you're just kind of like, I need to be around something that's more mission driven, that's more impactful, right? I just don't want to. I grew up. My mom ran the United Way in our town for 13 years. My dad was a big volunteer. I just had a charitable underpinning in my life, and I just was like, look. When you mentioned 2008 at the top, or when we were talking earlier, when 2008 happened, there was I came from a manufacturing town, and there was a lot of people that, companies were leaving and going through NAFTA, were going to Mexico. And there was a lot of people that are out of work, and there was a workforce. And I said, naively, wouldn't it be great if we could put my little small town back to work making solar panels, right? This is at the beginning of my clean tech odyssey. I just didn't know how solar panels were made. So I was just like, wouldn't it be great to be doing this? It was a little of a naive thing, but also with somebody that has bravado to say, I can make that happen. I'm going to go make that happen. I've done great stuff with famous people in Hollywood. So I started, there was a pivot in my life when I was about, I'd say 33, 34, and something happened. I got a call from a guy, William Morris. It was William Morris at the time, not William Morris and Deborah. And they were really, really serious about pitching to get the GM Chevy Volt, right? And this was right at 2008. This is, and the reason I know this timing is because they had, I was kind of a known art director, and they said, Drew, do you want to get on this like secret task force to go get William Morris the account for Chevy Volt, right? I was like, absolutely, absolutely. And then back to my sort of mantra of you have to know the business better than your customers to really understand it, get in it soulfully. So I got on this thing, and it was the first real exposure to alternative fuel vehicles. And that, remember 2008, there was barely a Prius on the road, And what happened was GM, while I'm in the middle of trying to like revamp the kinder, gentler GM through the lens of Volt, like literally I'm sitting in my studio and I look up on the TV, and the CEO of GM took a private jet to DC to ask for $30 billion to bail them out. And I was like, this is the antithesis of cleaner, greener, gentler corporations, and especially an industry that's, a pillar of American manufacturing over the last century and a half. And then I started really, really understanding it. Inconvenient Truth came out, the collapse happened, the Volt was there. I started saying, I can apply my talent and communication and understanding of engineering to this particular project, but I can also apply it towards what I want to pursue. And what I want to pursue was helping people through the lens of energy, food, water, and justice. But I did not have that vernacular or language in 2008. Okay, so the kids, Willow and Jaden, they decided for some reason. They decided they used to come to my office. I had this really cool office in LA with high up in a building with a lot of balconies. They're like, we want to put our homeschool next to Drew's office because it's cool. I was like, all right. So all of a sudden I had like this homeschool thing happening, and Willow would roll in roller skates, and Jaden would roll in, and they would just ask me all these questions. And they would, they would go to mom and dad, and they'd be like, Dad, we need solar panels. Dad, there's a huge ocean garbage patch of plastic. And as the anecdote goes, Will would go talk to your mother about that. And then Jada would be like, hon, I'm not indifferent to this, but I think you need to talk to someone that might be a little more expert at this. Why don't you go talk to Drew? He seems like he'd have an interest in this stuff. So I'm like, all right. And the kids were just rolling in. They're fun. They're cute. They're fun. They're really neat kids, not arrogant or spoiled or whatever. They're just generally and very well educated, So throughout the course of it, I was like, all right, mom and dad, I was like, Will, Jada, I need to be an expert at this if I'm going to help take the kids on in a mentor-mentee relationship. And I said, you need to send me to MIT for a crash course and everything, right? And as kind of like just so I can and that started my decades-long experience at MIT, which is another conversation. And so throughout the kids would come in, we'd do these classes. I would teach them about obviously greenhouse gas emissions and things that are outcomes of, pollution and industrialization and things like that. But what also, Jaden would say something like, why are we not powering the entire state of California with solar panels? I was like, well, buddy, there's an economics lesson here that I got to take you through. The economy and and what started as like a very leftist, greeny kind of greenhouse gas emissions and decarbonization kind of thing really turned into more of a business class about what's the economics of impact. And so I was like, all right, cool. And they were not confused by it, but I said, let's make a fake company, right? Let's create a mock company to learn all the flows of like, where do you put the company? How do you hire people? What are you making? How's it being produced? All that kind of stuff. And is it ethical? Is it not? And so I said, so what do you want to do, kids? And they go, I was hoping they were going to go, let's do cars. But they're like, no, let's do bottled water. I was like, oh my God. And I was like, all right, cool. And it's just right around the time where the plastic conversation would start to tip into the cultural conversation. And so I was like, all right, cool. I said, but we're going to look at it from an ethical value chain from the inception of the materials that we are going to put this in, all the way to who is it going to affect from a social justice standpoint, and who is it going to affect from either conservation or environmental impact standpoint. And they're like, okay, I don't know what you just said there, Drew, but that sounds pretty cool. And so we ended up starting to put together a mock bottled water company. And I remember this because on my 40th birthday, my family took a trip to Europe, and I happened to be in Florence, Italy, And I was walking up to a trash receptacle, and I looked in and I saw this like paper bottle by this company. And I was like, holy cow, what is it? I wiped it off, and I was like, this is amazing. And I brought it. It was kind of gross. It's like tourist Italy. And I'm like, all right. I brought it home, and I was like, Jane, dude, look at this thing. Look at this thing I found in Italy. It's for a milk company. This is amazing. And I tried to call the company, and nobody called me back. And I finally got through to someone in their Quebec office with this paper bottle innovation. And I said, hey, I really want to do something. This is great. We want to do in water. And I didn't drop the name yet. And they were like, we're phasing that line out. It's not going to be used anymore. And we will never do water. It was a company called Tetra Pak, and which is a multinational. And so I was like, oh yeah, okay. And so then I had to call in dad. And so dad was really easy to it was really to have a conversation with the president of North America in Austin or in Texas. So somehow all the problems went away. And so they were like, yeah, we'd love to do this. And so what started out as what started out as a presentation to mom and dad, and like, look, we found a bottle. Hey, we did this. Hey, it's ethical. We're going to have an ethical sourcing model for the water. What started out as a kind of a like a project, they were like, that's a real company. You should do that and let us help you do that. And so that's really how Just Water started. It was really a environmental science project that I did with the kids that really started to become a market-based solution. Yeah, it's still going strong, and it's, it really was at the front end of the decarbonizing and anti-plastic debate. The only other game in town was boxed water. And fun fact is that bottle that we ended up procuring to be able to do it, we bought a machine, we put it in upstate New York where there's beautiful water. That bottle is now widely used around the globe. And specifically Chobani, the yogurt brand is using it. So it's the domestic and brand recognition on the shelves. That bottle would not have been in Chobani's hand had we not saved it. Also, part of the bottle is made a lot of the plastic content is not made from petroleum. And not as many people know about this as I would prefer, but it's made from sugarcane from Brazil. So paper and sugarcane are things that grow back. When they grow back, they suck in CO2. So there's actually what we would call carbon content inside our bottle and the plastic. That's crazy. So I had heard about this, and I heard there was one Tetra Top brand down there that was using what they call bioplastic from a group called Baskin. I was like, dude, I am going to Brazil. I went down and met with Tetra Pak Brazil, and I said, we absolutely have to have this. And they were like, no. And I was like, yes. Because I didn't like the fact that on our factory floor, there were bags of plastic pellets, which is, the inputs for making and molding plastic, that had an ExxonMobil logo on it. I was like, this is not what we're about. I'm like, there's literally an ExxonMobil logo on the factory floor of the company that I founded. I was like, no. And so we went down to Braskem. I met all of them this is inside baseball stuff. But here's the deal. So that was 2011. And just recently, Lego and Hasbro have announced that they're converting by 2030 all their plastic. Think about it, that's a lot. All their plastic to that exact same Brazilian plastic output that we did. And so I'm not saying that we were the thing that did it, but we put the bioplastic into culture. And that's a really important thing. When technology is out there, it can go off and it can do great things. But if it's only heard by a lot of different people, if it's largely B2B, which isn't a bad thing, it's not moving culture. It's not moving kids. It's not putting the conversation into Gen Z and young boys and girls saying, well, we need bioplastic. Sugar cane's better than petroleum and all that stuff. So one way or another, that's kind of maybe a bit of a longer explanation, but are we thoroughly changing the world through Just Water, one bottle at a time? I would not say that, but what we're doing is moving conversations through innovation into the culture and moving. I'm very proud of Chobani. I'm proud of Hasbro. I'm proud of Intel. And I think we had a little bit to do with that. So.
Wow. That's such a cool story. Linz, what kind of questions does it bring up for you?
Hey, thanks.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's really fun. I can imagine you're like, actually, I have a friend, Will, can you jump on? And they hear that well-known voice and they're like, hold on, I'm paying attention to the conversation. Yeah, that's great. Drew, so after you've launched this brand and now you're like you mentioned that this 10 years at MIT, and I didn't know the story that the impetus was that you could be a better mentor to the Smith kids. Like I thought you just being like a super smart cerebral man just was like in that world out of intrigue, but I'm sure it was a bit of both, right? But I feel like now what you share with us a little bit, because you've talked to me in the past about as you've looked at how MIT was taking such incredible innovations and disruption in technology and solutions and all kinds of different utilities that was coming out of that epicenter. You saw that there was a lot of grants and a lot of like government funding and a lot of philanthropic dollars that were like helping, ideate on some of these incredible futuristic solutions. And maybe that you can segue into explaining what you're doing now with ecosystems, which is so exciting.
Yeah, well, I got involved when I went to MIT. I was just there to kind of learn about a lot of things, but then I noticed there was an anemia of storytelling and content and branding and kind of market fit. And I just said, "There's a real problem here," And a very good friend of mine is the head of material science for MIT. His name's Jeff Gross. And I developed, I developed that relationship over 5 or 6 years, and he's a buddy of mine. And if I talk to him, I go, "Hey, Jeff, what are you working on this week?" He's like, "Oh, I'm in the lab. I'm fabricating nanoscale desalinating graphene meshes." I'm like, "Nah, bro. No, you're not." I said, "You are reducing gender-based violence in the developing world for women and girls allowing access to education when they're not foraging for water." And so there was something I call the last mile, or outside of the US, the last kilometer storytelling problem, which is it's very challenging. What I've noticed that it was very challenging to connect the human side, the human outcome of hardware and software solutions that are being developed in places like Caltech, Stanford, MIT, Baylor, Purdue. And so one of the things that I started to realize when I was over there is that I met this young woman who was in Sloan, MIT Sloan, and that's the business school. And she we got partnered because she's a dynamite and articulate and amazing. And she knew I was coming kind of with Will Smith, the people who coordinated knew I was coming with some, famous people. So they wanted to billet me with somebody. It was great. So we walked around and we looked at a tremendous amount of different technologies that were either spinning out of MIT or were sitting in labs at MIT. There's a kind of a trajectory of the way technology either stays in academic education or goes out. And so she sort of took me on this little odyssey of seeing all these different things. And she had just said, "Now I want to tell you about the work I'm working on." And I'm like, "Okay." And we sat down at lunch. She said, "A lot of the stuff that you saw over the last 3.5 weeks, she said, a lot of it's going to die. It's not going to make it." And I was like, "Oh my God, this is horrible." I was like, "Why?" And she said, "Because technology like this is not technology like Instagram or Snapchat, or DoorDash or things like that. These are technologies that are really, really impactful for people's lives, for social and environmental impact, but they need more patience and more concessions. They need capital that can help de-risk them so that they're ready for venture capital, right? If you have a company that's a revision of let's say an EV battery innovation, and then you have like Snapchat on the same playing line, Snapchat's going to give VC money right away, right? It's got, even if they're not even revenue positive, it's just like, "You got users, we're going to do it." All right, the battery company over here, VC's not going to touch it because it's way too early and it's risky. So now the risk factor can get so that's what we call, and so what we call it's a valley of death that companies like that EV battery company would have to cross. And this is a known thing in the clean tech innovators and engineer space. It's called the valley of death, and it's very hard to cross. It basically says, I am fantastic innovation. This is great. It's coming out of Yetming Chang's lab at MIT. It's amazing. You're going to get DOE grants, you're going to get friends and family money, but then it's just going to be quiet. And there's not money because venture capital is not here to be agents of social change. And there shouldn't be demonized for that. They have LPs, they want returns, they want companies that don't have as much risk as something that are life-changing, really impactful, direly needed technologies that are out there. And so it was this woman's graduate work that I really gravitated to. And I went back after my trip. I went to Will and Jada, and I said, they were like, "What'd you see at MIT? Did you see flying cars, holograms?" And I was like, "Yeah, I saw all that." I said, "But really what I saw, which I thought was the coolest thing, was neither a hardware or a software. It was a woman's work that really clarifies the way charitable capital can be used to help early stage innovators that are for profit." And so so when I said to Will and Jenner, I was like, dude, you got to give this girl a grant to get her thing going. And I kind of like leaned on him a lot. And I said, like, you have to do this. And the joke between myself and family is that they gave this woman a grant to make me go away just because I was battling on it. I was banging on it. And so and she has now created the Prime Coalition, which if you're in the clean tech space, Prime Coalition is kind of the darling of funding for using philanthropic capital to de-risk early stage for-profit companies that are on the heels of energy, food, and water. And you can look it up at pridecoalition.org, and they've since raised a phenomenal amount of philanthropic capital and now blended capital into a fund. This woman, her name is Sarah Carney. At the time, her name is Sarah Wood. It was amazing, and it was crushing to hear that a lot of these companies weren't going to make it. The reason was because they're way too risky for venture, and they're just out there on their own. And she had kind of developed her graduate work and her thesis on the idea that charitable capital can play a role in there, but charitable capital, as it was at that time, really didn't understand that they could actually put money into for-profit early stage companies that are energy, food, and water companies. They didn't really understand, and entrepreneurs didn't understand. It was a two-sided marketplace that didn't know each other, and there was no what we call an intermediary for that. And so I went back to Will and Jada, and I was like, "This is amazing. You got to see this girl's work." And they were all hoping they were going to see like flying cars and holograms. I said, no, this girl's work is really, really important because it affects it systemically affects the way direly needed technology will get and stay alive and get its way so it's attractive for VC. And so I fell in love with this, and then she used something that's been in the tax code since the 60s called a program-related investment. It was sorely underutilized. She did her graduate work on it. She's a star, and she created a thing called the Prime Coalition. And I was able to get her a grant Jada's Foundation to operationalize her endeavor. And then when the first company that they wanted to prove this model came out, it was a gorgeous company called QuidNet, still obviously in business. QuidNet, so it's like an alternative to energy storage for renewables that uses dried up oil wells underground and fills them with water and makes them like elastic. And it's like cheap. And it's such a cheap version to like lithium ion and chemical batteries, which we have a variety of social and environmental impacts, although, as we electrify everything, we do need them. So anyway, I was like, Will, Jada, you need to give a grant to this new company called QuidNet. And they're like, why? And I go, because it's awesome. And I got Jaden all excited about it. So he was walking around going, QuidNet. And so we ended up, along with Sorensen Foundation in Utah, also came in on this grant making to give QuidNet the money to prove that their technology works. And guess what happened? They proved the technology works, and who invested in it? Bill Gates. And so through Breakthrough Energy Ventures, which is like a who's who of billionaires that take moonshots. So we proved it. We proved that this technology would have died on the vine through charitable capital, got to a place where it was attractive for venture. And that's really important because, and my example before, Snapchat was attracted for venture when it was still in a garage, right? But Snapchat's fun, but it's not changing the world. The technologies we need to change the world, to have social and environmental impact, both in the developing world and the domestic and over here in the developed world, need a special kind of capital, and it's better for the entrepreneurs because charitable capital is non-dilutive. And that's a really important thing. And so I was very proud to be involved with the Prime Coalition early on. I was proud to help kind of coach Will and Jada Smith Family Foundation into this type of more sophisticated grant making and be able to kind of show the impact that you're making, because these are not things, these are things that are become market-based solutions that are really important in the symphony of solutions we need. And Bill Gates refers to what we need to do to really get a handle on climate change as a symphony. It's not one thing, it is many, many things. And one of them is market-based solutions. It's really important. So throughout the course of me creating Just Water as a for-profit company with a mission-driven thesis, and throughout my work at having my nonprofit 501c3 being on BIPOC communities, trying clean water, and we can get into that. And from my work at obviously at MIT and seeing these technologies that are not going to make it, and seeing these technologies that don't really have a commercial market, that I've just have developed a vernacular and a language and an ability to kind of look at this. And that's what led me to where I am with Ecosystem. And ecosystemfund.org is a way that very similar to the Prime Coalition, which is doing very complex gigaton decarbonizing types of technologies, right? In the energy and water space. What I learned from Just Water and that endeavor, and we're doing it with a notable, Jaden and Wilf, is that as Gen Z is starting to come online and starting to lean in and out of college, there's a huge wealth transfer coming up, like one of the most in history. And Gen Z is going to have, over the next 15 years, all of the wealth and all of the cultural influence, because they're just better at influencing culture than we ever were, Jess and Linz. Better at social media, they're better at sharing, they're better at talking, and they're a little bit angry, and they're activated. They are activated. I gave a talk with Jaden at Coachella, and it was just all Gen Z kids. They're all coming up there. What can I do? What can I do? I'm like, vote. Go out here, do this. Everyone has a group. Everyone has a state sustainability club. They're really energized, this generation, because they're kind of a little pissed on. They feel like the generations before them kind of stuck them with the bill, which is not entirely untrue. And so when you see where Gen Z is going to go, Gen Z is going to vote with their dollar, and they're going to vote with their digital footprint for sure. And I've seen it, with Just Water was people voting with their dollar. I'm not going to buy a Nestle product. I'm going to buy Just Water or box water. Now aluminum has become mainstream, and they're buying aluminum for a variety of reasons. So when I created Ecosystem Fund, it's the principles of a lot of the experiences I've had over the last decade with the flow of philanthropic capital, the de-risking of entrepreneurs and innovations that are sitting on the shelves at places like UCLA and MIT. It's just there's not a talent base around to understand the market fit, how you de-risk it, and how you get it into the cultural sphere with either celebrity or content and storytelling. And there's a big hole there for that. And so Ecosystem is taking those principles and dropping it down to a retail level to make consumer goods and services that are based on innovations that have either a reduced CO2 emissions, reduce water, reduce waste, have public health outcomes, and can stripe across as many of the UN Sustainable Development Goals as we can. We're very, very excited about it. And it's a way to use charitable capital to move things that otherwise would not see the light of day, move them to the point where they become investable and can become in culture, on shelves, in conversations, on social, and have proven impact and quantifiable impact. So I'm pretty excited about it. Basically, the culmination of everything I've done over the last 15 years.
I mean, I'm super excited about it too. And, just full disclosure to our listeners, Drew and I are working together on an initiative that my dad actually created around innovation for agriculture. So making nanoparticle chelated minerals. It's called a foliar spray for those who maybe aren't familiar with it. And we micropolarize trace minerals and chelated minerals and then spray them over, crops. And it goes right into the plants like through osmosis because they're so small, these tiny little particles mixed with water. It's totally organic. And it's all around rejuvenation of especially the topsoil, which is a big problem all over the world. And so,
which lends to that point is you'd be surprised just how many people really don't understand the opacity that big farms and big fertilizer are intentionally putting up. People don't really understand the dark underbelly of vegetables and food and monocropping. And so as we work together in this particular regenerative solution, which makes it more accessible to everyday people to get involved with the principles of regenerative agriculture, we're going to tell the story about how bad pesticides, fertilizers, and generally monocropping, which is again a little bit kind of crazy. But when you drive across the plains and you see corn forever, that's actually not a good thing. The way it is, when you see soy forever, monocropping, singular cropping is really, really bad. And as you start to peel back the layers, it's not good for your human health. It's not good for the workers. It's not good for our nutritional value. And so throughout what Ecosystem wants to do, Linz, and this is, we're not just saying, hey, here's a cool product you should go buy it at Home Depot. It's saying this is a cure to a problem you might not know that is pervasive in the U.S. Nutritional value of vegetables has dropped like 50% since like the 60s, like the average nutritional value of a tomato. And childhood chronic diseases is skyrocketing. There was like 4% of children in 1960 had a chronic disease. Now it's 30%. And so is there an invert? Anyway, so with Ecosystem, obviously we want to bring technology like what what we're working on in the ag space, but we want to bring knowledge and understanding and you create a movement around that. And you know what? BC doesn't want you to go off and do a bunch of storytelling. What charitable capital can do that. We can go and we can talk as much as we want. We can go out, we can take more creative risks with charitable capital to get important for-profit companies on the shelves and into culture.
I love that, Drew. I mean, it's super fun. And just, you kind of coined it as like, we have to build movements around these issues. It's bigger than a product, it's bigger than commercial opportunities. So yeah, that's, any other questions that you have around all this?
I know we're kind of done for time, but I still want to ask this. Drew, for people who are as interested in this as Lindsay and I, tell us again what this underutilized thing is called about the programs, where that allows charities to do this. What was that called?
Well, the technical term, there's two. Program PRIs or MRIs. They're kind of the same thing. Program-related investments and mission-related investments. And you can do that in a variety of different ways. You can, as the sophistication of philanthropic capital kind of grows, you can, let's just say, okay, Lindsay, you have a company that is going to do regenerative agriculture, and it's going to help people across it's going to help farmers. It's going to reduce, water spoil. It's got a variety of income impacts. Okay. And Jess, you are a nonprofit, right? And so Lindsay wants to go launch a company that is called XYZ. All right. It's a little risky right now because you got to work out some of the bugs, right? She needs some patience in her capitalization. Jess, you're the Jess.org. Okay. You give grants to things like this. She's a for-profit company. You're a 501c3. You can give Lindsay a grant, which is called a program-related investment or an MRI. You can give her a grant. I'm making up for $100,000. That's what she needs to de-risk this. So Bill Gates can go invest in Lindsay. Okay. You can structure it that, okay, Bill Gates invests in Lindsay. Lindsay has a great profitable trajectory, and all of a sudden she gets bought by somebody, an exit event. You can structure it so Jess, she can pay you back the grant with a bonus. You gave her $100,000. You could give her back $150,000. So in the nonprofit space, your endowment manager or your fund manager that's not worried about the mission, he's worried about putting all the stuff out into ETFs and Apple and Tesla and making sure that he's earning year-on-year money. He's saying, wait a minute, I'm giving grants out to all these nonprofits. If I give a grant to this Lindsay gal and she goes off and has an exit event, that money can come back. Tell me more about that, said the guy whose job is to raise money. The idea that there could be if I write a check to Harvard, okay, for $1,000, okay, buy $1,000, I never see it again. It's a nonprofit. It's one way. Harvard's going to use it. It's going to go do something. I don't know what, but it's not coming back. So in this case, these particular grants can help Lindsay cross the valley of death, get to the point where can either have revenue or take on risk-based capital. And you gave her a license, right? You can be proud of the environmental impact that you're helping Lindsay create. That's the charitable what for. And then if Lindsay has an exit event, it can come back. Totally legal. It's amazing. It's the investment gap that threatens the planet. That's what we call it. And it's a very, very important way. It's an innovation in philanthropic giving, and very similar, Lindsay, to the themes of the documentary on charitable that you're an executive producer on, which is we start to see philanthropic capital the last decade and into the next decade is really going to innovate, and the way it's used to really get ourselves. It's one of the sort of arrows in the quiver to really address some of these issues that are really facing society. And philanthropic capital can really, really have a role, and have a role with what is going to be needed, which is market-based entrepreneurs or mission-driven.
Okay, my final last question is, I feel like I've been learning this lesson from Lindsay because for like a decade plus I've been following her around as she goes to Australia and throws a John Legend concert that raises $118 million for polio, and does the produces the Global Citizen Festival in New York and raises $3 billion for charity. It really set the example to me of how celebrity can be used for good. And so I would love if maybe just talk for a minute of it seems like you have believe in it and have benefited from this idea of mixing storytelling and leveraging celebrity and trying to make this world a better place.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between foundational people that have influence and spokespeople. Right? If you're a spokesperson, you're getting paid to shill for a project, right? But when I see from my work, I'm on the board of the Environmental Media Association, which has a number of different celebrities that are involved. It started by Alan Horn and Norman Lear. Norman Lear's Norman Lear, and Alan Horn was the chairman at Disney for a long time. And they thought that putting environmental themes into movies and storytelling in TV was a really good use of their energy. Alan Horn was very anti-smoking, and so at Warner rather, he forbid any movies to have anyone smoking. Like he knew the power, and I thought it was great. My really good friend Alicia worked at Warner Independent, and she was the one kind of relayed this to me: no smoking in any Warner movies. So what I like about what's happening now is that celebrities is kind of an odd word, really, when you think of it. It seems so tabloidal. It's not. These are people of influence, and these are people of passion and art, and they're people that I think the idea of being, whether you want to use the word influencer or not, the idea of these people with influence or a public eye care. They're when you come from the liberal perspective, they care, and they care about using their platform's a new term that's come up over the last 10 years, to sweep out injustice, to shine a light on people that are doing great stuff. Don Legend obviously is very, very good at it. There's a number of people, Brad Pitt, Leo to a certain extent. There's a number of people out there. And I think what happens is sometimes there are people with platforms that are like, I just don't know enough about this. I'm not an expert in, electrify everything renewable. They just don't know enough about that. And so with the kids, with Jaden, I've had a relationship with him since he was 11, and it's just genuine, authentic relationship building, I think. And the understanding of saying, Jess, if you come to me and you're a celebrity guy, and I was like, what are you into? It's like, I really am not happy about the treatment of women in the workplace, right? Well, I'm like, all right, cool. I say, let's talk about it. Let's figure out what's out there. Let's engineer something that's out there. Let's look for people that are out there doing this in a certain way so that you can become more of an expert in it. It comes back to the idea, if you really want to be good at something, you got to be an expert. And the journey of 1,000 miles starts today. So Jess, you might be like, I really have empathy for migrants that are coming over. Then you got to be an expert for it. And being sort of an academic in these types of things, I think there's an opportunity for a lot of celebrities to really become experts and get in earlier in the process. So like Matthew McConaughey's out there talking about Lincoln, right? And he's getting a good check, and he's funny, and he's charismatic, and you're like, damn, I want a Lincoln because Matthew McConaughey makes some kind of outlawish. But he's a spokesperson. Now I love Matthew McConaughey. It's not a slight on him, but with some of our innovations, the second I see something that's like that might align with one of the celebrities that we know cares about either food or nutrition or oceanic health or something like that, you're gonna be like, dude, you need to come in earlier and come as a co-founder, learn this, come meet the entrepreneur, become an expert, because you're going to be the person that pushes it. It's not just like, hey, I started a tequila brand. Like if some celebrity came to me and was like, I want to start a tequila brand, I'd be like, one, you're crazy. But two, the space for starting that is to create a carbon negative tequila brand. Help them, push them to understand that it's not what you sell, it's what you stand for, and that everyone can stand for something. And then through the market-based solutions and consumer-based solutions, that you should get involved with things that are aligned with your values and your mission. And there's a whole generation of young, awesome celebs coming up, little Chalamet graduating class that are awesome, but they need some steerage. They're not George Clooney and Leo who put in the work. Robert Redford, about the Redford Center. Those guys put in the work.
Well,
anyway, I hope that helped. I hope that was
great. It's great. Linz, I'm going to hand it back to you if you want to ask the last question or close this off either way.
Yeah, no, Drew, I really appreciate it. I love what you're talking about. That line was so beautiful. Like, it's not what you're selling, it's what you stand for. And I think that,
in life,
the most effective people in sales are people that only buy what they're selling. Like they embody it. They believe it. It's their identity. And that's what really gets people to buy in and to transact and to move and take action. So I love what you're saying. So Drew, with that, like how can people get behind what you're doing or support or connect? What can we share with our audience as we kind of close up here for how, if they want to get involved? I mean, we've got high net worth families that listen to our podcast. We got entrepreneurs. We have people in social good. There's a lot of like really talented, really high capacity people that listen. And yeah, what can we tell them about how, if they want to connect with you and support or get involved, or they want to explore what you're trying to innovate on?
Well, thanks, Linz, and thanks for your nice words as well. I think that kind of goes back to that two-sided marketplace, is that we obviously always invite any technology, any innovation, even if it's crazy, to come into our network of people, we pretty serious people that can look at it and go, yeah, that's Nikola. Or that is amazing. I can't believe it. You think it's for medical? No, it's actually for agriculture. There's just ways we can. So anybody that has a technology that's interesting, that's on energy, food, water, and justice, Drew at ecosystemfund.org. And then the way we help those technologies get out to actually help people societally is through charitable capital. So if you are a donor or a nonprofit that believes in energy, food, and water and wants to see market-based solutions for them be developed, and also have them kind of first look at these technologies as they're ready to cross into the for-profit venture space, Drew at ecosystemfund.org. That's how you can help us, and be a part of the impact that we're hopefully creating. So I feel pretty good.
Amazing.
Thank you,
Thanks for coming on this show. Thanks, Jess, for having us.
Bye, everyone.